Welcome back after a long day. Now, we've had lots of discussions, lots of presentations, and what you might not have noticed in the labs, we also had an issue with the documentation, and up until 1 minute ago, we tried to join up all the results, and we have all the documentations with the exciting topics, and it's my honor to present this to you now. Now, today we have had several labs, and tomorrow we will have the final labs. But the one thing I can tell you beforehand is that we wouldn't have any trouble filling 2 days with the results from today. We have lots and lots of experts, 82 experts altogether from the whole world. But we are taking a look at it now, and to prevent this from turning into a monologue, we are going to hear some original sounds from some of the labs, and everybody. So the people whose original sounds we'll play have been warned about it, and we'll start out with the first lab that started at 10 o'clock, gender adjusted citizen communication in administration. We heard a lot about the administrative language. The core requirement for administrative language is to be understandable, fact-based. Emotionality sounds strange, but it's the case. And the University of Constance says that it needs to be emotional. And one thing that was interesting in Lorin Friedrich's presentation was that he said that it's not that important what the authority decides, but rather how it communicates. So the communication between administration and citizens needs to be characterized by the satisfaction about the communication, and that's more important than decision. And we also learned in the lab that language changes approximately every 50 years, and that gender language has also started to become relevant in the administrative language, and it's important that this should also be strengthened by looking at gender-sensitive language. And we discussed in the lab that a lot of support is needed if administration decides to use a gender-adapted language. And we also had the Media Institute of Rhineland-Palatinate with us, and they said that since they have changed their communication, they receive many more applications for their jobs, that people enjoy writing job adverts, and interestingly enough, they also get more applications, not just by women, but also by men. So language seems to be doing something to people. And just to give you an example, we brought something along from the lab. Here you can see a few of the best practices and also bad practices that were discussed. As you might have heard, in our region, within the city of Waldorf, cats have been banned from leaving their home because of a bird that might be eaten by them. And there was also a legal text where the word cat owners, also with a female version of it. And my colleague has taken a look at this beautiful sentence and examined it, and it's something that has been discussed very often. Does gender-adapted language make administrative language even more complicated? No, because in this sentence there are so many factors that make this sentence with 51 words complicated. We have subordinate sentences, we have lots of technical terms, inserts, etc. So this one little star or asterisk doesn't really make a big difference. Next, we'll take a look at Lab 3, the gender equal city we need in Africa, challenges and opportunities. We had really interesting speakers. Amongst others, we heard from a colleague from Egypt, Haibala-san, and she said Cairo is the most dangerous city. We talked a lot about safety in cities, slums, the increasing population, also the increasing pollution of cities. And this is also something that we heard during the keynotes yesterday. Of course, we need the so-called gender lens in order to make sure that we take the right perspective when looking at cities and when looking at infrastructure, transport, access to different services, and in order to make sure that they are equally accessible for all sexes. The same is true for tech services and finance. This is an issue for African cities, and women need better access here too. Best practice, some of them were discussed, but I don't want to anticipate too much of it because we have a very nice guest who joined us, Anna Lukavi, the mayor of Temagana, and she's going to tell us what her impressions were herself. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to be here. This happens to be the first time in Germany, my first time in Germany. I haven't been here before. I must say I love it already. Although I haven't had much time to go around, I'm sure tomorrow I'll be able to do something. And this is also the first time participating in this program. And I'm very happy. I've learned a lot. This is a platform for us to know and learn and to share ideas. A lot has been said, and I know that the action plan, when I go back, going to impact knowledge, whatever I've done, whatever I've learned so far. Thank you very much. You mentioned my name correctly. Even back home, some people struggle with my name. My name is Anna Adukwe Ado. I'm the second girl in my family. Second girls in my family, we call them Adukwe. Yeah. Anyway, I was having a discussion with Annette, and she felt that I should share a little bit of what we were talking about. And it's essentially about challenges women face in politics or local governance. My background is in banking. I've done banking for 15 years. But deep down, I love politics. And, you know, banking, you're not supposed to be doing that. But I still did it, quietly, learning the ropes in politics. I felt that I was suffocating at a point. I knew I could do more, much more, with what I have over here in terms of local governance, helping my people in whatever they do. And when you sit back, you realize that there's much to be done, especially where I'm coming from. And we need good people with the right thinking, and right attitude to be able to deliver, to help people, help the lives or improve the lives of our people. And so I decided to do that. We've been talking about gender equality, and I feel that there's a question. Aside the stigmatization, and male-dominated politics, and then the socioeconomic, cultural, and institutional, and cultural barriers. I feel that the main thing here, the question that is bothering me, is the fact that our women themselves, are they ready to be empowered? And if you want to empower somebody, you don't have to force the person. The person must understand exactly what they are doing. Are they ready to be empowered? As I said, nobody called me. I decided to do it. My own experience, based on my own experience, I can stand here and say that I felt that I needed to empower myself, first of all. So I want to stand on this platform. As we keep on talking, let's identify or let's impact that notion that are women ready to take up the challenge, to be empowered? aside all the barriers that we have, obvious barriers. And in my own small way, back home, I've decided to put up a group of women, myself as a role model, to educate people, train people, women that they are interested in politics, local governance, so that they will come up and occupy those positions to change their lives, change the dynamics in the country. Because we need people to push the agenda, to make sure that our people live well. I came here, I've seen so many things, and I was discussing with my colleague, what can we do when we go back home? Why are we not doing it? But I believe that we should take the step. How do we take the step? We need people who are ready to impact the lives of people in the country. Some of the statistics I have over here. We have 16 regions in Ghana. My region is Greater Accra region. And out of it, we have 29 MMDAs, that is Metropolitan, Municipal, and District Assemblies. Out of 29 assemblies, there are only 6 women. And in my assembly, we have another one called Assembly. That is made up of, the municipality is made up of 11 electoral areas in my municipality. And out of it, we have about 4 women. And then 5 are also appointed by government, that is 16. And only out of the 16 people, 4 are women. So it clearly shows that a lot must be done. Women must be sensitized. There's nothing wrong showing your face and taking up the mantle to lead or steer the affairs of local governance. And so I want to encourage all of us over here. I don't know where you're coming from, but you can, when you go back, we can also have a network of women together, nurturing, first of all, identifying and nurturing women who are ready to face the challenges. If they don't mind, they can still stand up there and say that this is what I really want to do. And I believe that it will go a long way to change everything. Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank. Thank you so much, Anna. Danke, dass sie sich bereit erklärt hat. Das war nicht ab.
Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Anna. We hadn't discussed, we hadn't really arranged this before, but this was such a spontaneous and empowering speech. Thank you so much. And it's really true. Networks help people who had been marginalized before can really make progress. And after this lab, let's move on to lab 4 and let's move on to a different area. So far, we have mostly focused on SDG 5, gender equality, and now we'll mostly look at partnerships, international operator partnerships in the field of water. And we collected quite a lot of facts about the status quo. In Germany, there's too much legislation to enable international projects. There are lots of different rules and responsibilities, many language barriers amongst the German partners, and there was also the request that English should be the target language, so the English language can be used. We also heard about projects in Zambia, water projects where financial means are lacking, that there are huge losses of water in Zambia. This was one of the big issues that we looked at in this lab. So what is needed? That was also an aspect that was dealt with in every lab. We didn't just look at the overall situation, but we also looked at what needs to be done to tackle the issues. And what do we need? We need financing, we need the right legislative framework, but we also need local companies that implement everything and that are well informed about things. We also need an improvement in the construction technology, and some standardized processes were also requested when it comes to water projects.
Projekte vorgestellt in diesem Lab, nämlich Projekt in El Vejo, ein Projekt in Hebron. Es wurde auch darüber diskutiert, ja, mit welchen einfachen Mitteln in Sambia schon auch Erfolge erreicht wurden konnten. Das heißt,
we were able to achieve success in Gambia. All these projects, I'm sure, a great opportunity for German cities to keep developing and to discuss things in small rounds. And as we did in various labs, there were groups of 10 to 20 people that are able to reflect things from various perspectives. And this is what happens in the city of Mannheim. So that was the Urban Lab 4. Let's go on to the next one, which was relatively large because it was about the value added by the Agenda 2030. And this sounds a bit vague. What do we understand by that? It was about the so-called voluntary local reviews, the VLRs. Many people don't really know what to do with this term because there are only 3 cities in Germany who have implemented this, but there's somebody who knows a lot more. And would you please introduce this, what you did there, dear Christian Hübel? Well, thank you very much. A very comprehensive lab. First of all, we reflected the base on the topic, what is the Agenda 2030, how did it come about, and what's the role of the SDGs. So this was done on the viewpoint of the service department and by Michael Zeil later on, underpinned by Miss Thurman. It was about voluntary local reviews. This is a voluntary review from a city where it is described how they have how much of the 17 sustainability goals have been achieved. So why do you do that? To send it to the UN? Currently, there are only 125 local reviews in Germany. Only 3, Mannheim, Stuttgart, and so we noticed that there is a value added if you draw up a German report, because it gives you a comprehensive overview of a community on poverty, economy, health, and climate. And then if this can be supported by facts and figures, then the question arose, to what extent is maybe too much of a burden for small communities, this VLR. And we have seen in Stuttgart that they have an extra body created for that. And this is possible in Stuttgart, but in smaller towns, this is not feasible. But we could see it makes sense to have a pragmatic approach in order to get started, and then to request support from other areas, from other cities. And SKD was willing to provide support in this context, and they will issue a guiding principles for drawing up such a review. And they will also provide support in the form of workshops on drawing up the VLRs. And so it is not so much about what is the benefit for the global level from all this, but and what will the United Nations actually do at the end of the day. And of course, this is by far too much for our capacities that we have available. And will there be feedback to the communities? And will this be a clear way to determine the status quo? We also discussed the discrepancy between the VLR and the voluntary national reviews. And then there was a comment from Cyan whether shortening a perspective on the SDGs, which is very linear, with this complex, it can actually meet the global requirements. So, but then the question arises again: what is the option? So this discussion, the OECD also came in and presented a project on the implementation on the territorial approach. And there also the metropolitan area of Rhein-Neckar is also involved. And then we had colleagues from MAN who presented and gave examples on how to make a contribution to provide a report by the MAN. And there were repeated remarks concerning that the administrations and local governments don't take the proper view of all this. And there's a lot more happening that you would expect. And we should also have to stimulate the civic society to cooperate in this team in the system regarding SDGs. And that was an important point, which also for us here is important here in Mannheim, because we have to keep a focus on how to address in a better way the civic society with more openness. These were the key points. Thank you very much. Thank you, dear Christian Hübel, for giving us this insight into this lab. And I have a nice quotation. Don't try too hard and take a more playful approach. That was a great summary of this new topic. Lab 5. So we are slowly moving forward. And this was, next is Lab 6, visibility of lesbians and queer women in the public space. This was also done online. And correspondingly, we first had a debate about what is a queer space, what queer urban planning is. And it showed very quickly that the thesis was raised that the structure of German or worldwide organized cities is dominated by men, and that the structures are adapted to men. Many public spaces, it was said, and life environments were adapted to men, like that men prefer cars, whereas women are more interested in bicycle lanes or pedestrian sidewalks. It was also discussed that women, historically seen, used to move in the private sphere and feel repressed into the private sphere, and this invisibility is not desired anymore. Another topic was safety. Lesbian women said in the lab that they feel insecure, unsafe, not all the time, and it's not always present, this feeling, but there was one participant who said that more and more often she feels unsafe. So then if this is an overall situation for the queer minority, and this was supported by other participants more. So what's required here? We got some ideas from various cities like Ljubljana. There is a park which is open, particularly for queer and diverse people who can meet there, where they can feel safe. It is an enclosed space, and there they can share ideas. And then in Vienna, there was a new neighborhood exclusively for women, and women. And a funny example was the question was whether we could change the name of Luisenpark into L- Park. And we had lots of suggestions, among them the request that we need more places where lesbian women can discuss the topics they are interested in. And they are still difficult finding venues for parties that will only be visited by women. And they also would wish that monuments, traffic signs, or other central signs are not so much adapted to men and our families, but that they should reflect the diversity of society. And the focus was on the importance that these spaces must exist, and there it's easier possible to avoid criticism. And many women said that they were exposed to many hostile criticism, a lot of hostile criticism. So thank you very much for the active involvement in the Lab 6. We go on and come to Lab 8, partnerships in order to achieve sustainability goals. This started here until 2 minutes past 5 in this room here, and therefore we don't have not that much in the documentation, and I would like to turn it over to somebody directly who attended this lab. Would you take over, please? No, Lisa. No, Christian. I think you can summarize it in a really good way. Thank you very much, Simone. In this, we had guests from 4 continents here. We had guests from Africa, Asia, North America, and Europe. And through the live stream, we know that at least Australia was also represented. So this covered 5 continents. The objective was to figure out what is a good partnership, what's it worth, a good alliance for SDGs, for leadership in SDG alliance. We have heard a great example for Golden Leadership Alliance contacts from Bristol, from Malaysia to the Change project and Christian Hübel, who showed how worldwide voluntary reviews are important. In the end, we focused on 3 main topics. One is governance of cities. Second was cross-sectoral partnerships, so this doesn't only concern partners, also companies. And third was that in those alliances, we jointly work together and have to struggle. With this, and all the attendants who were present at the lab want to keep working in order to continue the successes achieved so far. Thank you very much. I could also see that this lab may give rise to quite a few things in terms of partnerships. This is what the campus is for. Let's go on to Lab 9. Gender presentation of digital countries and partnerships on the way to climate neutral future. This was a very practical lab. We had 2 corporate representatives there, Eva Möll from Qperia, from the area of sustainability, and Ralf Lokai from the printers company, Lokai. And this is one of the most sustainable and environmentally conscious companies, print shops in Germany. And we had a vivid debate. And the host of this lab said something very nice. CO2 isn't everything, but without CO2, everything is nothing. This goes to show what is the most important driver for global warming. And then we had the 2 representatives from companies. For reasons of time, we only focus on the Lokai, the print shop. Anyway, Ralf Lokai told us that very early on they focused on environmentally aware color paints and inks. and that sustainability not only means ecological sustainability, but also social sustainability. And he said it has to be the focus must be clear on the SDG 5. What does it mean for the Printshop-Lokai? Loka said he needs family-friendly workplaces, he needs flexible work time models, and he also wants to strike a balance in terms of gender equality. So he is focusing on the SDGs, which he can control. And a company cannot cover all the 17 SDGs. We should focus on those that are more easily to achieved. SDG 5 is something that he focuses on. SDG 13, he says he does without fossil energy carriers. They have local suppliers, short transport ways, and works with environmentally aware inks. And we also BAUM with Yvonne Zwick, the Federation for Environmentally Conscious Managers, and SDG 15. How important is it to have partnerships within one's own city, within one's own community, in order to achieve those goals? And so that was Lab 9. 10 and 11. What happened there? We had such an intensive debate. They are not finished yet. So we have to give the report tomorrow. And this is a good sign, and I'm sure we will get very important reports on Labs 10 and 11. Let's take a brief look at Lab 12. The city that we need now. It was a lab to get involved with. And here, once again, we had a lot of debating and we also have an expert, Eva Gevick, who will inform us correspondingly what was said in this lab. Thank you, Lisa. Well, thank you, Simone. We had on the World Urban Campaign, the city we need now in Europe. Focal was what has been repeatedly said today. To achieve something jointly, we need one another. It's and this became very clear. This campaign is a platform for players who are not only cities but NGOs as well and companies. Everybody can get involved from various perspectives. The contribution in terms of sustainability goals can be made, and all this information can be rolled out to the United Nations, can be forwarded to the. And last night we already had seen a video. This is a campaign describing 10 fields of action where action is required. This was another focal topic in the lab. Action is required. And Analia Passam, who was a speaker in the lab, heads this campaign for Latin America, and globally this is broken down to 6 different regions where it was launched. And this goes back to the topic we had yesterday. The SDGs are a global joint language. We need mutual support. We have to cooperate. We have to unite. And this was a major topic. What are the barriers in this joint work? How can we overcome them? And apart from the language barriers, we also mentioned courage to start with international cooperation. And as Christian Hübel already said, city-to-city learning is a very important part of this Urban Thinkers Campus, and it became clear that cities can learn from one another. A first step in this mutual learning process and sharing experiences would be, for instance, to join this campaign so you can become a part of the network and can make your voice heard. And I would like to come back to Ms. Thomas' sentence, who said, don't make it so difficult. It's not so difficult to become a member in this campaign. And please take a heart and address us if you have any questions. Thank you very much, Leah.
And I'd like to take that up again. If you're watching us on the live stream, go to the World Urban Campaign. I think we have already been able to convince a few people in the past 1.5 days. That's at least what I heard about municipalities in Rhineland-Palatinate who are really interested in what we're doing in Mannheim. And it's certainly a good idea to take this as a best practice example. And we have lots of experts who are happy to advise you. Now, moving on from the SDG partnerships as a last point that we look at today, let's move on to two labs which are partly very depressing. It was labs 15 and 16. Let's start out with lab 15, mechanisms of escape and human trafficking. There were lots of considerations or lots of explanations about how human trafficking really works. And one thing that arose time and again, that it's a big difference in the perception of whether people who are refugees are male or female. And this is also something that is very relevant for the current refugees situation in Ukraine. Now, human trafficking is something that mostly affects female persons, and it was described as a control product. So if we don't look for it in our privileged structures, we won't find it, because it takes place in several subcultures beyond the perspective of the public. But it still exists, and for that reason, transparency is important, dialogue is important, so we see it. And the fact alone that in this Urban Thinkers campus, 2 labs have been addressing this topic is a very good thing, because it's a fundamentally important topic, and we need to talk about it. We need ways of identifying victims. How do you define victims of human trafficking? We need to improve the cooperation between the different institutions, the cities, the police structures, but also all the players, those who take care of these women, women's shelters, and other points of contact for those women, but also the registration of people, because somehow you need to gather who has arrived here, so you can also offer them shelter and care, so they don't fall prey to these structures. And we heard that there needs to be more specialization in the field of human trafficking. There needs to be expert knowledge on how these structures work, what might be indicators for it, so you even recognize it and can help. And there was also discussion about how people who flee their situation in their countries can be provided with a job in the city they arrive in. And as Christian Specht said, Mannheim is doing quite a bit in this field at the moment. And of course also we also need staff, human resources that help us in this field. As we heard, there are very few places for consulting and counseling, and there's also little legal prosecution for this, and that's a good that is a good example for what doesn't work very well. And then Lab 16, human trafficking for the purpose of sexual exploitation, on the example of Ukraine. And our document wrote that some of the statements of the testimonials were very, very saddening, really. We had people from Ukraine who talked to us about it. There was a discussion in English, so the notes are still in English, so please bear with us. We will translate this for you. But the subject of the session was that the status quo is such that, especially in Ukraine, lots of women have been traumatized. They are raped, sometimes in groups, and that there are also members who have to witness, family members that have to witness the rape, and that at some point maybe the physical traces of the rape might disappear, but the psychological traces will remain with those affected their whole life. We talked about unwanted pregnancies. We also talked about genital mutilation, and we talked about the fact that many people do not talk about these very traumatizing experiences. So there's a lack of language, a lack of speech about these things, and that there needs to be more help. There needs to be psychological help, legal help, as well as medical help. And we also discussed about the fact there was one city in Poland where abortion was also an issue. What happens if a woman who was raped arrives in a city and then she cannot have an abortion for religious reasons? So the situation is very difficult here. And we also heard that many people think from a Eurocentrical perspective that soon the war will end and afterwards the situation will be as it was before. But this will not be the case. A lot needs to be done here to make people understand that this is a subject that will define our societies for much more time to come. And there needs to be much more information about that. I would like to thank you very much for having discussed this topic here. It's an extremely important topic, and everybody who participated said that it was a sign of respect that this was a matter that was discussed here. And this is the lab that we will end our summary with today. Tomorrow we have another day, many other labs waiting for you, which we will also discuss. In particular, the lab Human Trafficking for the purpose of sexual exploitation. In the example of Ukraine, we will have that lab again tomorrow, but we will also have labs on landscape dimensions, how spaces are shaped where people also of different sexes live, and we will hear much more interesting and important input. We have already started some discussions and they have already been finished, and some of them will only end tomorrow. And I would like to point out a few further things to you that we have in store for you for tomorrow. In addition to the labs that will start at 9 o'clock again, the labs start at 10 o'clock, but we meet again at 9 o'clock to hear another keynote speech by Professor Dr. Annette Kehnel from the University of Mannheim. We could do differently, a short history of sustainability. It will be a talk that will also address several historical perspectives on sustainability that we already heard about today, and it will also show that there are further perspectives besides the ones that we have today. Lena Rüvelmann is the head of the Female Competence Centers. We will talk about startups. We will also hear our Lord Mayor, Dr. Peter Kurz, once again, who will answer your questions on the labs. And that brings me to the end of this event, but we didn't just want to have a monologue. For that reason, I'd like to turn over to you again. Other questions, remarks, or other points you'd like to discuss? Or do you have questions for some of the experts that we've heard? I'm looking around and everybody says, I need a break, or I want something to eat, or I want coffee. So I'd like to thank you very much again for this first day of our Thinkers Campus, and tomorrow we'll continue with the second day. Thank you so much.